Welcome to the Wealth Transfer. We've been talking about de-dollarization. Is it just Venezuela or is there more? Stay tuned. All right. So we've been speaking about de-dollarization. De-dollarization, what's that? For those of you who are new to the program or it's the first time you've seen it, I would encourage you to go to Wealth Transfer Ministries. You can go into the archives. You can watch past programs. I would encourage you to be a part of that. You can even go to Facebook. You can like Wealth Transfer Ministries there. You can even like Cornerstone Asset Metals. They're a phenomenal company dealing with some of the highest purity Judeo-Christian silver in the world. But be educated on this information because, minus my little spanky, politic angle from time to time, it's merely because I see Lucifer's devices and then I see what we the people, and I say we the people, I mean the kingdom, need to be aware of. So de-dollarization is really the impact of our hegemony, our bulliness, our superior superpower over all these decades. And what's happened is we've kind of run the course. And I know many people don't want to believe that. And I'm sorry, folks, even President Trump, as much as he's trying, although he's up against a really swampy establishment, but he's not going to be able to stop it. You just can't. Unfortunately, this has already been done. And when I say what's been done is the de-dollarization effect, meaning we only have, you hear about the American dream, the great American dream. Do you know the American dream was only originally because we were free people, originally because you didn't have somebody stopping you next to the crazy authoritarians back in the day of certain counties or something. But for the most part, we were free people to literally travel, exercise religion. We were free. Then the real American dream came up after this thing came off of the gold standard and went on to what we call fiat currency note. Now, this is known as a fiat currency. Fiat just means fake. It means it's not backed up by anything. It's just merely a piece of cotton, and it burns rapidly, by the way. It burns real quick. This doesn't burn, that should tell you something. But fiat currency in the 70s, 1971, when Nixon lied to the country and said that it was going to be temporary, and they knew that it wasn't, the fiat currency was born. Nothing backed up our dollar at the time. And I encourage you to go back and look in archives if you want to understand that better. But believe me, folks, that was the worst day in American history, just about, next to obviously some of these wars. But that's the day we nailed it. Now, what happened when they come off the gold standard? They start printing these because they could. They have a printing press. They could do whatever they wanted. They were the world reserve currency. So it gave them kind of an open checkbook per se, right? Now, I don't know about any of you, but you can't have a $20 trillion deficit, can you? No. And of course, America is well beyond $20 trillion deficit because we have 60 to 70 trillion in unfunded liabilities, meaning Social Security, Medicare, and such, and we can't pay for. But back then, when we only had 300 billion of these in circulation, back then, we weren't considered wealthy because we were the dominant superpower, and it's all revolved around our phenomenal military, and men and women in there, and armed forces, and those who support them. But we were able to print a lot of fake currency notes. So while we were doing that, we were able to print into prosperity. Now, we've done a piece that was called the 7 Stages of an Empire. Can't get into it now, but in those stages of empire, what happens is the countries eventually print these currencies, or in the old days, they didn't print fiat. They would bring in the gold and silver, melt them down and add copper. And eventually the nations their money turned into just copper, which was worthless on the world stage. In the 70s, we were able to start printing massive amounts of money. Now, we had to print a lot of money because we were on the heels of the Vietnam War, and we had a pretty bad financial hangover. And so that's why the interest rates spike so high. You can't ever do that again, folks. Interest rates will never, ever go that high. I will be surprised to see it even at 4%. Mainly because every quarter point they raise adds 50 billion in annual interest payments. We just can't afford that. Now, that goes up, of course, as our national debt goes up, which it did peak over 20 trillion now. And those are still funny numbers because it's actually more than that. But we were able to print. And so what we do is all nations do in the history of empires. They start massive infrastructure spending, and they have welfare spending, and they do all the spending. Wars. Every nation has done this pattern. It's incredible to watch. So when you study history, you see it. That has directly impacted us, though, because we were viable. In the 70s, we only had a few hundred billion in circulation. Now it's trillions. I don't want to get into the M1-2 supply line chains. I get it. But we have swap lines out there. We have all sorts of stuff that put this into the trillions that is really kind of out there. But physically, you'd be surprised. We probably have 400, maybe 500 billion in this country only. Think about that. It just keeps circulating. The rest of the currency is overseas. And that's a whole other issue. You should go see the War on Cash series. But during that period from the 70s until today, there was always this scream of the American dream. And that was mainly because credit had been created. And I think one of the men I respect a lot of history was J.C. Penney. He said to his board that when they introduced the concept of a credit card, because think about it, back in the day, we didn't just have credit cards for everything, right? And they introduced the concept of a credit card. And J.C. Penney said, you know, if the people that shop here at my store, if they can't afford to buy it, I don't think they should be buying it. Now, he was correct. We should always be living within our means. But the banking system, and I call the cartels of the Luciferians, they wanted credit expansion. That is known as Keynesian economics, and that's what we're in here in the Western world. It's Keynesian economics. Keynesian economics means to credit, balance growth, expand debt, credit. That's what they want, okay? But Keynesian was a socialist, so of course that's what they want, because eventually what does that mean? You're a slave. The Bible says that, you know, the borrower is servant to the lender, right? We're not supposed to be like that, but of course we did. The allowing of credit, and I get it, you know, houses and cars and different things we could never really genuinely afford without it. But in the old days, banks would know you're good, and then they would lend you that based on that. Credit went crazy. And the problem is credit expanded at such a level that allowed the economy to just burn, and we created wealth with it. There was genuine wealth literally created, so don't get me wrong. But that American dream was because we were in this engine cycle of massive wealth creation. I mean massive wealth creation. And it was through the 80s, and of course we had recessions, and it came down. Unfortunately today, the American dream's gone for the most part, and I hate to be the bearer of bad news. It is so difficult right now to go out and actually make it in the world. You could go to college for 4 years, 6 years, 10 years, and it doesn't guarantee an income. There are kids coming out of college that make $25,000 a year, and they have $100,000 in college debt. We have 100 million people in this country not working. 25 to 45 age males not working. Opioid epidemic destroying people's lives that will never be able to work again. The American dream is so complicated with regulations, burdensome inflation. Our dollar doesn't buy us anything. So we've gone away from that concept. Now, is the dream still alive? Yes. But it's very, very, very few can take advantage of that. Now, everyone can take advantage of it if you can find your way through the network, right? But the network is changing. So you see, the American dream's gone. And only those with an exceptional fortitude in their soul, it's not even really the education, it's a fortitude in your soul to be successful, will find that success. The rest of us are going to continue to kind of fall back if we're not in the right place in our protection and preservation of the money and assets we do create. So when I get into de-dollarization, it's huge because we've already lost the standard of living that we used to have. And everyone knows it. I don't have to explain it. We know because we're all living it. I can't believe the amount of money I spend on groceries, right? So I want to get into doing a little more of the de-dollarization, show you the examples. But before I do, I want to take a break, and I just want you to understand that when I talk about the American dream, I still believe we, the people, each and every one of us has the ability to succeed and be great. This nation still can produce great things from someone that no one ever thought could do it. It's just a lot harder. And going forward, as the Chinese and them start to take down the dollar and we de-dollarize the world, it's going to get tough on our standard of living. So protection and preservation is absolutely essential going forward. And the only thing I know that was constitutional and biblical and was going to give us that protection, God's money. So anyway, I got to take a quick break. We'll be right back.
Terrorism, a volatile stock market, rising food costs, natural disasters. Every day our economy is at risk, but your assets should not be. Cornerstone Asset Metals is here to help you protect and preserve what you have worked so hard to gain. Whether you have IRAs to protect, 401ks to preserve, or cash in the bank, our accredited asset management specialists are here to support you. Call now and we'll send you urgent information regarding changes to the dollar and challenges to our economy that you need to be prepared for. Learn how easy it is to roll over your current IRA or 401k into a physical precious metals IRA. We can even arrange to have your precious metals stored in a private vault or send it directly to your home. Do not delay. Call 888-747-3309 or register online at cornerstoneassetmetals.com today. Invest in precious metals and create security in your future today. Call now.
Welcome back. So, I got a little off on tangent with the American dream because I wanted you to understand that de-dollarizing the world actually is a very important thing for we the people. Because we were living this dream while we were expanding our dollar dominance, while we were paying off our enemies and our allies. And we were financing the world. I mean, just look at what we did with Europe after World War II, and we financed the world. And so in doing that, it gave us kind of a free ride because we could print our own currency. And we had, people were buying our US treasuries and bonds because we were petrodollar. We controlled the world because dollars had to be, or oil had to be priced in dollars. Well, the de-dollarization changes everything. Because not only do we have trillions printed dollars in the world that now is becoming less in demand, trillions of bonds, IOUs from the government, that's less in demand, you would be stunned who owns US Treasuries. And it's not what you think. But it's impacting our ability to have a standard of living in the future. So I wanted to get into more examples here. This was a piece out of RT, which is the Russian Times, where it says the U.S. slapped sanctions on Venezuela, condemning Maduro dictatorship. Well, no kidding, right? That is a real deal because Venezuela, we needed their sweet crude oil. And Chavez was already a nutmeg. Well, I don't need to be that way, but he obviously was, right? They were extreme socialists. Maduro's even worse. Venezuela is collapsing. And they try to use it as, we doing this because they're harming their people. I don't really think the elites care about the people too much. It's really because they're bypassing the petrodollar. They've now accepted the yuan instead of the dollar, de-dollarization, and the Chinese are now the influencer of a country that's right across our bay, right? Almost like the Bay of Pigs scenario. But the point is, it's taking away the dollar's control mechanism. And we do need Venezuela's sweet crude, by the way. So this is kind of an awkward situation for the United States. I'm telling you, it's because they're going to the yuan and ditching the dollar. Now, is there more examples of that? Well, let's walk in the golden boys of Russia, right? They are officially de-dollarizing. Not only has Russia eliminated almost all of their U.S. treasuries, they have been storing up tremendous amounts of gold. They just recently came out and said all their ports are no longer to accept dollars for trade. They're into the Eurasian area, the yuan, their own currency. They're de-dollarizing. Now, people say, well, of course, it's Russia. I expect them to. I don't think you understand. Nations were never allowed to do that before. We controlled the world system. And unfortunately, maybe it was just timing. Maybe, President Obama just had bad luck. He walked in at the wrong time. I think it's because he looked like a fool. But they didn't have any respect for him. Those 8 years is when this massive de-dollarization attempt started to take place. Now, in all fairness, probably wasn't his total fault, considering we had an economic collapse with all those, CDOs in the mortgage business, and that was all under other administration. But the point was, they saw tremendous weakness, and they bypassed the petrodollar and started setting up the framework that the last administration allowed to happen. Best example, Russia and China were working for like 10 years. In the old days, Russia and China were technically enemies, folks. It's hard to believe, but they were. They were border enemies. No one thought that they would ever become team up. And they were Russia was working on an energy deal with China. Years and years he was trying to get the deal done, and it just didn't happen. They finally inked the deal. It was well over $400 billion in energy that Russia was going to provide to China. They did the original deal in the dollar because it's how you're supposed to do energy, right? It's petrodollar. So the ruble and the yuan would go by the dollar, and then they would do their energy deal. Well, what did we do, though, during Obama's administration? What did we do? Sanctioned Russia, didn't we? Multiple times. So much so that the Chinese and the Russians said, forget the dollar. We'll do this deal in our own currency. We forced them to do the deal in their own currency. Now, we either didn't believe they would do it, or we did it on purpose to kind of take down our superiority. And there's many in politics that would believe that's probably plausible coming from socialist left. But that was a big deal. So once the Russians joined with the Chinese at that level, it started unraveling the Middle East, hence Ukraine and these other instances, Syria especially. The de-dollarization began where Russia then said, forget it, because we put sanctions on them, so what do you think they're supposed to do? Then they said, forget this. Then they said no dollars at the ports. This just happened a few weeks ago. So Russia is officially walking away from all dollar-centered trade. It wasn't the case, folks. It wasn't the case until now. And the trade wars that you're seeing President Trump start with China and some others, it's because he knows this was a bogus deal for America. And he's trying to reset the playing field. Unfortunately, it's probably going to be too little too late. But the Russians are all over this stuff. Now, let me show you this picture here. This is a pretty cool map. I like this. This goes into Ukraine. Now, under the control of the Ukrainian government is the yellow. Russian Federation is in kind of like the pink. And under control of the Russian forces is in a heavier pink. And then there's the Russo-Ukrainian border. Now, the reason this is really important, if you notice down on the very bottom there, that island, that's Crimea region. And then up in the right side there, that's actually Russian, it was always Russian controlled. That's Ukraine. Now, Ukraine is really important because Ukraine is where all the Russian pipelines would ship energy through Ukraine up to Turkey, over to Europe. And Russia supplies most of the energy to Europe. Germany, which is the engine of economic prowess in Europe, 40% of their energy came from Russia. Places like Finland, 100%. So without Russian energy, Europe's in trouble. So Ukraine was literally the vein, the artery between Russia and Europe. And we in the West, through false flag stuff, black ops stuff, it's just ridiculous. The coup that happened in Ukraine was us. And we failed at it. Many will say we succeeded because we overtook a legitimate government, and that's why when they talk about this Russian corruption, it's just such a joke. But we took out the Ukrainian president and instituted our own little puppet for the West. And in doing so, of course, during that coup time, what does Russia do? They take over Crimea. Now, as I said before, Crimea, folks, it belonged to Russia back to Catherine the Great. It's theirs. They have their nuclear submarine fleet underneath the mountains there in Crimea. Do you think they're really giving that up? But the West was using that as a reason, oh, we need to contain Russia. No, no, Russia's doing everything they can to contain us from invading them. This map of Ukraine is important because what we did in Ukraine was really drastically try to provoke Russia to war. They are so calm and cool, I can't even believe it. But we were trying to provoke a war. And many would say, well, why would we do that? It's mainly because we're in trouble financially and we need this distraction. And they've always done in history, they've done that in war. Now, I'm going to have to take a quick break, but before I do, I'm going to show you a map because I want you to understand that if you're seeing in the media that it's Russia, Russia bad. Now, Putin's probably a pretty bad guy, but we're not so lollipop charmers ourselves. And I'm going to show you some things that, this is just the tip of the iceberg. We are containing Russia in a way that if I was Russia, I would be ready. We're pushing something. Why? And that's why I say that. Why were we putting sanctions on them at the time we did to force that energy deal away from petrol? Why are we forcing these people in the East to certain agreements? We didn't have to do that. So I don't know why, except that something bigger needs to be done, and that bigger is going to impact we the people. So I have to take a quick break. We'll be right back.
Terrorism, a volatile stock market, rising food costs, natural disasters. Every day our economy is at risk, but your assets should not be. Cornerstone Asset Metals is here to help you protect and preserve what you have worked so hard to gain. Whether you have IRAs to protect, 401ks to preserve, or cash in the bank, our accredited asset management specialists are here to support you. Call now and we'll send you urgent information regarding changes to the dollar and challenges to our economy that you need to be prepared for. Learn how easy it is to roll over your current IRA or 401k into a physical precious metals IRA. We can even arrange to have your precious metals stored in a private vault or send it directly to your home. Do not delay. Call 888-747-3309 or register online at cornerstoneassetmetals.com today. Invest in precious metals and create security in your future today. Call now.
Welcome back. So I get into that to help you understand visually. I don't care about the politic. I really don't. I think they're both taking us down the same rabbit hole. But why were we doing this? Forcing them to react a certain way. Either we drastically miscalculated or it was done on purpose, which doesn't make any sense, right? Look at this here. This is the West with NATO, which is crumbling, against Russia. Russia's on the right. And look at this stack. The British have drones, tanks, and 800 British troops are being sent to Estonia. The Canadians are going to Latvia. Britons are sending a full-size battalion to Estonia, light armor, Challenger tanks, and other weaponry, and the French and Danish companies as well. The Germans are moving into, that's Lithuania. Latvia were the Canadians. And look at the United States moving into Poland. And British and Romanian troops are also heading to Poland to form part of a U.S.-led battalion. And then you have the RAF Typhoons. They're being headed down into the Black Sea in Romania. That is a stunning image of our pressure on the Russian border. Now, we failed in the Ukrainian coup. People can debate this. I'll take them on with some evidence, but that was bad. Remember when they shot down, I shouldn't be laughing at this stuff, I apologize, but it just blows me away this happens. Do you remember when that jetliner with innocent people got shot down? And they tried to say it was the Russians? Yeah. You notice the story disappeared really quick? Yeah, because the Russians proved with satellites that it was actually the Ukrainians in the West that shot it down. They were trying to create a false flag. They were trying to create a scenario where the world would be outraged at shooting down these innocent people, and therefore we would go and hit Russia. What gets me is somehow, because we're trying to geopolitically think our way through this, we can kill innocent people and destroy lives and don't even care. Because we shot that jet down. Do your homework on it, you'll see. They had the satellite. They were taken out. It wasn't what they said, and that's why it disappeared off the media, by the way, because Russians are smarter than we are in that respect. We are building a catcher's mitt around Russia, and we've been doing this with NATO for some time. I mean, without other macro theories, these are just theories at this point, but a lot of people chatter that NATO was falling apart. Germany likes Russia because they need the energy that Russia provides. And they don't like the hegemony that America keeps kind of producing. And NATO, there was chatter that NATO was falling apart. And America had to create some kind of dependency that NATO needs to exist. Because, folks, Ukraine was not part of NATO. It just wasn't. Now, we were trying to get them, but they were smart enough not to go there, let alone the president at the time was Russian, sympathetic. But we are creating a catcher's mitt around Russia with NATO bases. I showed this on another program. You should see all the bases around that country. And then we're provoking them this way. They keep talking that it's Russia that's the bad guy. Russia is de-dollarizing, yes. They're behind the destruction of the petrodollar in the Middle East. I can understand why we're going after Russia. I do. Don't get me wrong. It's our survival. When they de-dollarize, we lose our standard of living. I'm talking the world as it starts to de-dollarize. So we knew this was coming. And so we're trying to stop it. So don't get me wrong, I get why we were doing it. And I support the fact we have to do something. I just think what we were doing was horribly Luciferianly guided and not through, I think, a proper approach. It could have been done differently. We are provoking Russia to war, and I believe it's to cause a distraction for the financial reset that's coming. It's all through history has been like that. So I just encourage you to continue to be educated. Protect and preserve what God has given you. Be good stewards of what He has put you in charge of. And know that with the lamp unto your feet and the fire of heaven into your day that you pray, you will have that wisdom and understanding. So until next time, God bless you.